Thank you for joining this episode where we explored how we can use usage data and usage insights to drive product development. Please subscribe to our channel to access all of this content as well as any forthcoming episodes. Hello and welcome to the Data for Subscriptions podcast, where we explore and learn how to run better subscriptions businesses. I'm your host, Berat Banyan, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Tobias Gunnarsson from Avanode Group to the show. Welcome, Tobias.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and great to be here.
So today, I'm really looking forward to the conversation because oftentimes, Tobias, when we have guests on the show, we typically talk all variations of monetization and how we can spin up new business models, how we can drive different kind of subscription models. In today's conversation, we're going to speak a lot about how to learn from usage data to improve your product development, everything related to your offering, which is something that I've been looking forward to. This is exciting to have you here as Chief Product Officer at Avanode Group as well, we should say. Before we get into that topic, Tobias, why don't we start with you telling our audience about who you are, and in particular, what led you in your career to Avanode?
So to start off, at heart, I'm really a product nerd. Product management is, what I love and what I've been working with all my career. I think that comes from I'm a curious person, and I tend to get interested in many different things, like the kind of this and that, rather than having to choose. And then you just naturally get into product to be in the middle of things. I was also the computer nerd that went to business school. So that sort of also shows that both perspectives thinking. And I came out of school, there was no jobs. I went by luck directly into product marketing, and then quickly from there into product management, initially for more sort of hardware products. I was first job I was into the self-service machines in bank lobbies. But software has always been my heart, and even working with that kind of hardware products, I quickly went into software. And actually my first sort of foray into SaaS and subscription software was in 2005. And it was for one of those hardware products where I was so frustrated because the software was just something that you got for free because you needed to configure the machines. And these machines, it was something called closed cash handling. So it was basically, if you go to the store and the cashier doesn't want to take you money, you put the coins into a machine and she slides the notes into a machine and it tallies up automatically. That was what I was working with. And it was a hard sale because nobody wants to pay for security. And that's what it was being sold for. But actually what it allowed to do was to change your layout of your store and change how all of your staff worked. And so I actually was a part of bringing in that what we were selling was a new way of working, and we were getting 1/3 of the revenue from the software subscription of the software platform that made that possible. And the hardware were just like these physical devices that you needed to make the money digital and for this new way of working to actually be possible. And then from there, it's gone on different industries. So I've been in retail, security, automotive, and now from cars to airplanes, I'm in aviation.
We're going to talk about Avanode Group and want to learn a little bit more about what the company does, and we share that with the audience. But just a quick point, 2005, although not too long ago, but when we speak as a service models, I think it's safe to say you were one of the pioneers, because back in 2005, not a whole lot was happening when it comes to shifting business models to what you just described. That's pretty cool. You started early, we can say.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's good to get into the beginning. And I do remember like some friends, they were more discussing, can we avoid sending CDs when we release a new version of our product?
Yeah.
So it was that was the world back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk Avanode Group then. You mentioned just briefly that it's within aviation, of course, but why don't you give us a brief introduction of what the company does and what it offers, and then we'll dig more into the offering in just a minute as well.
Mm. So we're a B2B SaaS company, and we are in a niche industry. So when we say aviation, what we actually work with is the small area that is business aviation. Business aviation, this is basically private jets. So you're not flying on a schedule, you're not selling seats, but instead you're chartering an airplane for a trip, and it's ad hoc when you want. So we serve that market as a tech provider, and we're really trying to increase collaboration and to create the tools to make trips happen in that space.
And you've been around for about 20 years, I believe?
Yeah, we're just a few years past, 2 years past celebrating our 20 years anniversary.
So 22 years, exactly. And a rough overview of your offering, obviously having done a little bit of my homework, you have a marketplace that you basically offer, or you bring together the most important players between the providers, the operators, that is, the clients as well. And then on top of that, you have additional services like payouts that you've added fairly recently, and etc. Right? You want to maybe expand on that a little bit more, because I want to jump right into the data aspect, but we can maybe give folks a bit more detail about the portfolio itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So Avanode it's 20 years old, and the original product was the Avanode Marketplace. So this is a B2B sourcing marketplace. The market is, just as you said, brokers on one side. So these are very specific travel agents that work just with private jets. And then operators, they're basically small airlines. They manage and fly the aircraft. So they are on the selling side. And 20 years ago, this industry was based on a phone book. So Avanode replaced the phone book, where you would look up in the phone book for an airline operator that had a hangar in Hamburg. But since airplanes fly, that's a super inconvenient way of locating an aircraft that is in Hamburg, because that guy's aircraft could be anywhere in Europe. So what the Avanode Marketplace does is tie together the brokers and the operators based on where the aircraft actually are to find you the best option. And then we've expanded from there. So sure, you can source an option for your trip, but every trip needs to be sold. So the next step was a sales tool. So basically leads and quotation of charter trips. And from there, you're not really a marketplace unless you're also making sure that the trip happens, so that it gets booked and paid. So we got into payments from the perspective of none of the off-shelf solutions really supported the needs of our industry. So we had to, integrate and orchestrate our own payments. And the last part is operations. So for these operators, the small airlines, we do also provide a tool where they schedule their flights, schedule their crew, they do their flight reporting. So this is a little bit the ERP system of the small operator as well.
But it's interesting because, you've created really a ecosystem where the complete value chain of activities happens, from basically the scheduling and the planning to the actual finding and locking down the services to the payment and the entire kind of service assurance aspect. All of that is happening here. Okay. And it's my understanding is that it's a pretty large marketplace with about 7,500 of brokers and merchants, operators that are on this platform, correct?
It's around 2,000 brokers and operators.
Okay.
And this is a niche industry. So we are the leading marketplace, and this does represent sort of the key players in the industry.
So let's now dive right into the data aspect and the usage data aspect, which is the core topic of today, having now understood a bit more about how your marketplace works. So can you describe a bit more granularly the flow of data? What flows through your marketplace?
Mm. So on the marketplace side, if you look at there's a supply side and a demand side, as in most marketplaces. What's really special is that it's not an inventory product. So it's not like you go onto Amazon and you can like buy something and there are 100 in stock and you know exactly the specifications of that product that you're buying. This is a calculated product. So each trip and each customer demand really appears and is calculated when somebody searches for it. So on the content side, on the supply side, this is where we have aircraft with all the descriptions of them on the amenities. But then the most important thing is like the schedule of those aircraft. Where are they actually? And the quoting model. So basically the business model of the operator. What am I selling? And then we basically use that so that every time a broker searches for a trip, we basically look at the market and say, what do we think you can be quoted? And that is really like, so on the demand side, we really have the data is really trips. So that you can see this as a search where you're going in, you're having an itinerary, you're having a date, you're putting in specific requirements of the trip. What am I looking for? And then we are matchmaking and guessing. So like, we think you can get this kind of quotes for that trip from these operators. And then you send an RFQ and you get quotes. So it's sort of search, RFQ, quote, which is the flow, and the aircraft and the schedules and the business models, that is the content. In one way, you can say like it's a little bit like Uber, but it is with private jets.
Yep.
But you can also say if you make that comparison, it's like, well, that's really complex. Like you're somebody standing on a sidewalk, you have to match them with the car and how far away is it and how soon can it arrive and what will it cost. Well, take that then where you have an aircraft, it's traveling much further than a car, and the customer's demands are much higher. It's not like you can get an Uber or an Uber XL. It's like, well, I want an aircraft with this kind of amenities that has brown leather seats.
Right.
And by the way, I'd like to have Perrier and blue Tic Tacs on board. And then to find a match for that.
Let's talk a little bit more about the business model and business and revenue model here, because from again, what I can see, you're offering several subscription models from basic to professional to enterprise. And then you also offer pay-per-use as well as products and modules and custom integration on top. Now, if we add that to just a picture that you described, the 2,000 different entities that are basically sourcing, finding, quoting, matching these highly specific needs, that paints a pretty complex picture, which I would love for you to explain for us a little bit more. It's just extremely data rich, and I would say entity rich. But before we go there, can you just explain the difference between the different tiers that you have, basic, professional, enterprise, and who is typically the customer that will go for the pay-per-use model on top then, or maybe in combination?
Yeah, so we don't have a real pure pay-per-use model, but we do have the subscription revenue, which we call memberships. And there we have tiered memberships for different needs. Then we tend to have call fees. So an add-on is the integrations that you can make, where some of those have call fees. And that's usually where you're going B2C, so where you're using our platform to reach your own end client. And then the third is really transaction revenue. So where we also want to complement the subscription revenue with transaction revenues. And call fees and transactions, they are more usage-based, and subscription is generally aircraft or user based. And we've tried to simplify that to keep to those levels. And for the subscription membership, it's really that classical get into the product. So the starting tier is really like, okay, you're a small company, you want to be up and get visible in the industry, but it should be easy to join. And then as you have more people in your company, then it's really okay, you now need to get up onto the advanced, which is the core membership where we try to put the value. And then we have an enterprise value, which is really, you're really integrating this into your custom workflows, and you really want to provide your special sauce by integrating our tools with your tools, and then you get up to that enterprise level to do that.
So let's talk a little bit more now about the complexity that I just pegged for a minute ago. What kind of level of complexity when it comes to the data that is at the core here we're speaking about? Because it sounds like it's pretty massive.
Yes. I mean, the first thing that you said is like complexity in the revenue and business model. That's also true, because if you've grown the portfolio for 20 years, if you're sales led, then you grow a little bit that complexity of what you offer. And we've tried to streamline that. But on the other end, as you say, we have a marketplace for a calculated product, and we have tools that support an ad hoc service with a lot of regulation, and where multiple companies need to cooperate to deliver that service. Like having a charter trip, putting that together, it's not just the operator that needs to fly the airplane. It's sort of the broker working with the operator, working with the fuel provider, working with the FBO, so basically where you're landing at the airport to provide the on-ground services. Like all that has to be put together. And so from that perspective, there is a lot of data and a lot of collaboration that happens on the platform. But on the other hand, to then, as you said, like to check, are we doing the right thing? Are we serving our customers? Are we providing the value? Then we have to be pretty clear about what value are we providing to what type of user at what part of the trip life cycle with what product or membership that they are buying. And that, as you get up to a portfolio, it puts a little bit of a complexity compared to, a younger company, a startup company, where you sort of have one product, one customer, you're starting in a limited number of markets or your home market.
So with that picture painted, let's pivot a little bit and talk about the role of data in your decision making as head of products. So let's just start with the first big picture question: is what role does data play when it comes to you and your team taking decisions for product investments, product roadmap, product development?
Very, very important, especially if you don't want to run blind. That's one of my sayings is I'd rather have blurry vision than be blind, but I would even better if I have perfect vision, which you rarely do in product. Within Avonode, we run, the roadmap should tell us where we're going. So that's sort of our strategic path into the future and how we are going to realize that future. A lot of company, like roadmap is just one of those words that can mean anything depending on who you talk to. For us, for us specifically, when I talk about a roadmap, we use a portfolio roadmap, which is really our product objectives prioritized over time. And then for each product team, we have a product team level roadmap, which is really the problem that they have been given to solve, to do discovery and delivery on. really it was like now and then what's next and what's later after that. And so looking at sort of data and how that plays into the roadmap, it's really about three things. The first thing is on a leadership level, how do we decide what problems are worth solving? And this is really about where are we putting our chips? Where are we investing our money? And how do we make good bets? So classical product, it's both about focusing on the business opportunity, like how big is this? How valuable is it? But it is also looking a lot about the usage data in our product to say, how valuable would this be? How many of our customers do we think this would fit? But also to identify what are the pains that people are having, both from where we see gaps in the adoption funnels, gaps in the user journeys where people are dropping off, or customer feedback, or the value metrics in our products. This is what our product should do. It doesn't seem to be doing it. How can we move the needle on that? The second step is really setting direction. So giving an objective to a team, how do we guide them with a goal of what they're trying to achieve? And a lot of that is just agreeing on what are the key results. What would success look like and how would we measure that to give an idea of okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. Which leads to the third thing, which is really tracking success and being to celebrate and have some fun together. But yes, we're moving the needle. Good things are happening. And so validating our ideas and then tracking the success of them to celebrating, you cannot do that without data. Because then it will always be an opinion game.
Yeah. What I'm keen to kind of use now these three aspects, and if you could give us an example, Tobias, of so from the point of view of seeing the data, learning from the data, and then first is basically taking that decision of what you should solve for, which was the first angle. Do you have a recent example of how you did that discovery? And just take us through it and allow yourself to be a bit of a nerd, as you said in your introduction. We're all ears.
Yeah, I mean, so one fairly recent example is on deciding what problems to solve. So we started to hear two things. One was that there was a new business model that was appearing. And so this was customer feedback, which was great. But the other thing we also started to see was if I put it ahead, the accuracy of the marketplace was decreasing. So the matchmaking accuracy, how good we were at actually guessing, was decreasing. And so this was we then looked into the data and said well, why was that? And we identified, well, it was actually related. This business model was growing, and people that had that business model, they couldn't really set up how they should appear in the marketplace correctly. And this was having an impact. So the accuracy of the marketplace, really the quality of the content in the marketplace was decreasing. And these customers were important customers that had larger fleets, which means that it had a significant impact. So that was the data there allowed us to identify a problem. It allowed it to match it to a trend that we were seeing in customer feedback that we were having, and really setting hey, this is both a goal, but the goal isn't just to support this business model, which can be very vague. The goal was actually to support this business model, make it the standard for all customers that had it, and move the metric on the marketplace accuracy.
And that, of course, sets the addresses the second point that you said, which is to set the direction and also which KPIs that you need to fix for. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more without maybe giving away too much in terms of when you said so, how you use that data to then say this is the level the quality and accuracy need to be at?
So I think that the KPIs we wanted to to get were really two. One we invented for this, which was, it was quite easy, both through data and just from us knowing our customers, to know who was a floating fleet operator. So our KPI was actually that we wanted to have 90% to get onto this, to configure themselves as this business model. And we were sort of accepting that there would probably be 10% that had some really weird model that we wouldn't be able to support. And we just have to sort of work on them to change or maybe adapt in the future. And then the second one was, so we wanted a 10% change in marketplace accuracy on the whole, which was actually would be a significant change for these specific customers.
Great. Now, this is super helpful. And so the last one was, of course, tracking success and celebrating. Now, I don't know when in time that was done, but did you obviously reach the milestones that you wanted? And how did that part of the journey go?
It went, it's always fun when you can celebrate. And it actually turned out that we could significantly change the marketplace accuracy, which was great. So that one we could celebrate early. To get to sort of a 90% penetration, that actually took longer. And I think this is where we're getting into a completely different podcast here, but that is where we also get into like, how does product and customer success work together? And like, you know, how do you drive adoption? So that's, let's save that topic.
No, for sure. But I also think that this is, I appreciate the level of detail here, Tobias, because I also think that when I listen to this, it's the classic thing that we can just say, it's not so much, it's not easy to fix the data, but you can fix that data. But the other aspect is also kind of shifting people's mindset and making organizations to change, which is the other KPI that you said. And that, I would say oftentimes, at least, if not always, takes a bit longer. But that's great. Thank you. So then,
and you actually jogged my brain there.
I can see that you were forced to think hard. That's good. Then I'm doing my job properly, Tobias. Okay, let's flip now and talk about the tools and methods that you use, because we understand from the first part of our discussion that this is a very rich marketplace. It's pretty complex with the flow of data. Now we also understood how you use that, and you gave us an example. But talk to us about how you basically bring that data down. What systems and tools do you use so you can really use that so effectively as you've done?
Exactly. So if we look at it, you know, as product, we're trying to build products that customer love in ways that work for our business. So we sort of have that, okay, what's the product data that we want, and what are the business metrics that we want? Now, to get that, if we start from the product side, we're really trying to then invest in the right problems and build great solutions to those problems. The data that we're then doing, for me, it's just very important to have a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. So you have sort of UX research and customer feedback on the qualitative side, and then you have product analytics and your best business metrics on the quantitative side. So if we just talk about the customer feedback in the beginning, we're there. It's more about channels. How do you make sure that you're collecting the customer data? And for us, we have customer-facing teams. This is we are having a sales motion, an enterprise sales motion as we approach our customers. So our CSMs, they are in frequent contact with our customers. They log this in CRM. This is automatically going then into our research repository. And then we have other channels, which can also be customers are doing feedback within our products. That also goes into our research repository. We are doing events and we get feedback that way. That goes into our research repository. or we're actually doing UX research as a part of our development and learning that way. And that goes into our research repository. We're a fairly heavy user of Zapier to connect some of those things and make sure that we are collecting as many channels as possible. And then the second is like distribution. How are we using it at? So we use our UX research repository really for aggregation. Yeah, to make sure that we're using customer feedback when we identify a problem to solve, and we can use what we already know instead of having to spend time to go out and discover from a blank sheet. But the second part is like, how are you reactive? So we just have 3 levels of product feedback, ranging from just for info to a key account is really angry and, hey, product, can you please help us give a great answer before they call our CEO? And level 1 and level 2, they're actually always pinged to Slack. So there's a tag and a rating, it's pinged to Slack to a channel, just to give this, and that gives us 2 things. A, it allows us to be reactive, especially when we've just released something. But B, it also allows us to sort of have a feeling for what's going on, to act as a sanity check when we do our analysis. And I'm like, I kept seeing this in Slack. Like, was that really not a more common feedback than this? And like, well, actually, okay. So then you get that sense check of what's happening and where you should start looking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really good for us. On the other hand, we use Pendo for product analytics.
Yeah.
And that allows a few things. Like, it allows product managers to be pretty self-service in creating events and metrics and measurements. But it also allows product managers and product marketing to work together in the same tools. So it gives product marketing all of those metrics to really fine-tune engagement. So we use Pendo also to have product engagement within our products. And we used to have a huge discussion all the time, which was like, oh, we need this data point because we want to segment our product marketing towards users that are expecting this behavior. So there was always something missing. And now we have both in the same tool, so they can work together and set up sort of their own metrics, and anything that we have as a metric can be used for any engagement campaign that we do in the product.
So we stay on the product analytics side and the quantitative data. We go back to how you describe your portfolio. There was the marketplace. You had then, of course, the scheduling element. That was a product in itself. Sched Aero, if I pronounce it correctly, Tobias, and not butchering it. And then you have also the payments module as well.
Yeah.
Can you run us through what are the key metrics that you look for for the products, the types of metrics, I mean, that you derive from your subscription data?
Absolutely. And that's a really important question, and also a question where I've both been very frustrated and also learned a few things. So one of the sides of it is, for me, on the product analytics side, which is really like the value metrics of the product. What is important in the product? I was super frustrated with Pendo when we got it, because they have something called core events, which is like almost these hero events, these core moments in the product where the customers achieved something, but they have a limit of 10. And it felt so restrictive, and we just couldn't make it work. But it actually told us that we had split the product incorrectly, and we needed to split the product according to our membership and according to customer value within the Pendo tool, so that we could have core events that were relevant, and that we could use those 10 core events for the right product area. So on that side, it's pretty product specific what those value metrics are. But then on the other side, which is more on the business metric side, there it's very standardized. So there you're really looking at, the lead, the acquisition, the activation, the adoption, and the retention metric. So retention is churn. And it tends to be the time to activation is very important for me, and time to adoption is very important. But we also tend to look at conversion. And for me, I very often look at conversion from activation to adoption, because that's really where the product influences a lot. As a company, and different other teams in the company, they look at different parts of the funnel. But for me, really looking at, we did a good sales effort and we acquired someone. We also did a great onboarding effort. They were able to test it, so they've been activated. But product failed if they managed to sort of do the value moment, but then they failed to adopt. Then on the product side, we are the drop-off in that funnel, and we need to look at, how are we providing more value in this feature, or how are we providing more usability in this feature?
And I can only guess that if we go back to your different tiers, that for an enterprise level customer, the duration of time between activation and adoption must be much longer than, for example, a mid-sized type.
Absolutely.
So you adapt your metrics when you look at the conversion, you adapt your metrics specifically in the goals that you set based on those different tiers.
Yes. Not on the product tiers, so not on the membership levels, not on the, are you paying a little or are you paying a lot? But we do it on customer type.
Yeah, that was what I was after, because bigger customers, bigger portfolio, more complex offerings, going back to that is not just a seat and an airplane. It's actually a whole lot more that goes into it. Okay, gotcha.
Yes, exactly.
Now, this was, again, very insightful. Looking at it from like the marketplace to, let's say, all the way over to the payment side, do you apply the same logic across the board then that you just explained?
On the business metrics side, yes. And then on the product analytics, on the value metrics side, then it is different for each product area.
Of course.
Which yeah.
The one thing that I
and
wanted
if we
to
go,
no, go ahead.
So I think you were asking for examples before. So if we go, for example, on the marketplace side, then we would have a value metrics for the buyer side, and we would have value metrics for the supply side. And in general, to give an example, on the buyer side, this would really be availability as one, marketplace availability as one metric. If I'm searching for something, how likely is it that I will find something? Because if I don't find something, we're not providing value. But the other value is really matchmaking accuracy. So we're going to guess what quotes you will be able to receive. Was our guess good or not? So if you receive, well, the worst is if we say you're going to receive a quote and you don't, then our guess was very bad. But if we guess you're going to receive a quote and you receive a quote, but it's significantly different from what we guessed, that's also bad. So that's sort of the matchmaking accuracy. And then on the supply side, well, what we're really looking for there is, on the one hand, the conversion rate, because you don't want to be swamped with leads. You want to get the valuable leads. So that is really the core metric on the supply side. And then if you look at value, what you're really trying to do is get a booked trip. So that's, of course, are you getting leads and are you getting booked trips? Those would be the value metrics.
Tobias, my final question, as we're kind of wrapping up this part about kind of tapping into the data and so on. So when we deal with data, of course, there seems to be a high degree of manual efforts to make sure that we capture the right data, we massage it in the right way, and so on. Of course, we want to automate as much of that as possible to become more efficient. What would you say? How much of manual efforts does this require of you versus automated workflows that basically takes the right data, structure it for you, and make sure that you feed the different dashboards that you have?
I think it's automated when it comes to pure product metrics. I think that we have it in a good place. The complexity, and I don't. It's in many ways an unsolvable complexity. Is for some of those value metrics, we're talking about blended metrics that requires information about the customers, about what they are actually paying us, so the revenue side, and it also comes from the behavior side in the product. And there, it's an investment in the time to create the automation that will create those reports. In our case, that's where we have Harry and our great insights team, and we're using Power BI to get those kind of blended analytics today.
Very good. So we're going to start wrapping up our conversation. I just have a few final questions. First of all, Tobias, it's quite clear that what you've explained to us paints a strong picture of how you really look at customer data, usage data, subscription data, and take that into action when you decide on product. But of course, all of us have challenges. So I would say, knowing what you know today, how would you have done things differently if you will look back 3 years so that you could have maybe potentially progressed even further? Because, of course, there are obstacles nonetheless. So what would you say would that be? So how would you do things differently to set up an ideal situation, if I may ask for?
Yes. Number one, we talked about the company being 20 years, and we talked about the complexity in the offer that we are. It's it's subscription, it's different tiers, it's add-ons, it's call fees, etc. And there was also overlap in that, where we were charging for the same thing to different customers using different products. So the first thing I would actually have done earlier, if I could, was to have worked with commercial to streamline what we offered, so that I could tie that directly to each product area and each product manager, so that each product manager had a clear view of what was the membership, what was the subscription, what was the revenue that they were driving, instead of having that being a little bit of an overlap and a mismatch. Because really, like that, people can do great things if they understand where they're going and understand what success is. And that was an issue. The second is that would then have driven what we talked about with Pendo and the core events. So I would definitely have split. With what I know now, I know what the product split should be. I wish I had known that 3 years ago, because then I would have done that 3 years ago. But it took a while to learn and understand and dig into. We talked about sort of those value metrics, and to really then identify, and not only within product and the product teams, but within the whole company, mission and market. Like, these are what we see as the core value metrics for each part of the product. This is what we are driving towards. This is what we are looking at as important, because that created, when we did it, such a cooperation and like an alignment of thinking within the company. So those are valuable, and a key learning from that is, as I tried to do that, there was more friction than I expected to actually make it happen, because everybody's busy, right? Like, everybody's got stuff to do. Anna, one of my directors of product, She just, solved this unsolvable riddle. And we sat in a room, and then she just said, well, Tobias, there's never a good time for this. So this is just a product priority. Is this the most important thing that we're doing now? And I said, yes, it is. Okay, well then there will never be a good time, and now isn't a good time, but we're just going to have to set off a few weeks and do it now. And everybody's going to complain, but we got to do that now to have a better life in a few weeks' time. And that was a little bit of a turning point, actually, because when we were just doing it when everybody had time, it just never got done very well.
Tobias, with that great advice, I thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much also to everybody tuning in today.